Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen, and we're with comic Jake Velazquez. Jake Velazquez, how the hell are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Brian?
Oh, good. Thank you so much. I hear that you are wiped out because you had one of your Penthouse comedy shows last night, right?
Yeah, it was the show started at like 10:30, and so we thought, like that's what we're used to with comedy, but because New York's closing at 11, I think everyone was like just not used to being up that late. It was kind of sick.
They're like, is there still a curfew, man? I got to get home before the cops beat me up.
Oh no, for sure. Like the last couple comics, you could tell the audience was a little sleepy by the end. It was very interesting.
That's funny. And you don't have people like all juiced up on a bunch of alcohol, right? Like, hey, at these rooftop shows, is it kind of BYOB, or are you officially not supposed to have alcohol at all?
Yeah, so they're usually BYOB. I think last night there was like a couple drinks for sale. I don't know what's allowed to be said or not. Maybe let's say it was BYOB. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's usually that's the case. Also, like not a lot of people seem to really be drinking. Everyone's kind of just sitting there and enjoying the show. But you could tell by the end they were ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get into the future of comedy, whether or not this rooftop thing is kind of sustainable. But before that, people can find your comedy and hopefully links to all your shows at your socials. And I know I follow you at Twitter, you're Jake D. Velasquez. And then at Instagram, you're Jake_Velasquez.
Yep. So Jake underscore Velazquez, and it's
Yes.
VELAZQUEZ. A lot of people put the S in there. There's no S.
No, yours is the correct spelling. Everybody else sucks.
Exactly. Exactly. Spell it like the painter, Diego Velazquez.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And you're gonna make the name even more famous. You're gonna steal your name back.
That'd be tough, but I hope so. It'd be good.
And then you have a link tree here so they can see that your Penthouse comedy. It looks like it's at a couple venues. I know you do a couple rooftops, one of which is Tiny Cupboard, and a lot of people are putting on rooftop shows there. But you're also at a cafe.
Yeah. So we're also at Cafe Erzuli, which is a really cool space. Actually, I'm excited to be there. But we haven't done it yet, so that's going to be next week is our first show there, and hopefully it goes well, and then we could do something on a more consistent basis. But
Is that going to be like out in the backyard or something of the cafe?
yeah, they have a yard, but it's set up really nicely. They're like usually they have like jazz and stuff there, so it's kind of like
Ah,
this like high end vibe. I don't know
nice.
how it will mix with comedy, but I think it'll be fun.
Were they kind of out in the backyard or whatever even before the pandemic?
Oh yeah, I think they were even doing comedy shows before the pandemic.
That's how you know it's pimp. If they were
Yeah,
already set up for the outdoors, man, some of those backyards can look pretty fucking sweet when it comes to these high-end cafes, especially if they're gonna have jazz there.
no, for sure, for sure. I mean, there's especially in Brooklyn, because it's hard to have these like big outdoor spaces in Manhattan, but especially in Brooklyn, there's like some really, really cool places, and hopefully more start opening up for comedy shows because I think it could be really cool. We're kind of limited right now, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and so what's gonna kind of happen after it starts getting cold? Do we think there's gonna be a vaccine? Do we think the city's gonna stop being tough on these indoor venues such that they might start slowly increasing capacity?
Well, so I actually also work in commercial real estate. So like,
Nice, you're the person to ask. All right.
yeah, yeah. So like, I actually the New York City Hospitality Alliance, which is like a lot of bars, restaurants, hotels, stuff like that. They're starting to like talk about suing this like Cuomo and the SLA, the state liquor
Nice.
authority,
Nice.
because there's no plan for indoor dining yet, and obviously like they're putting the nail in the coffin for all these businesses that have like already suffered so much. Especially like it's I know New York's tough because we're on top of each other, but there's like some spots if it's big enough and you could social distance and you have masks, I don't see why 33% capacity wouldn't work because they're doing
Yeah.
it at gyms, they're doing it at museums, and at gyms and museums, you're more likely to brush shoulders with people than if you're sitting, spread out and
And at
dining.
least at the gym, there's tons of expelling of breath and virus and things like that. The viral load per
Right.
cubic inch of air or something is probably pretty heavy at a gym. But also, some of this might have to do with, because I think it's airborne. I think if your ventilation system is better, if you kind of kick out old air and pipe in new air, I would think that you should be able to show that to the city. And right now, because it's just so emergency basis, they're just kind of locking down everybody without regard for, people who might take those extra measures like putting in new ventilation.
For sure. Actually, there's like some businesses popping up now. This guy reached out to me the other day. That's what he's doing. He's like help the HVAC system. It's like the AC systems for a lot of these places where like
Yeah,
the work is. He's like
yeah,
helping install these like better filters for the sake
good.
of the virus. And then also another business that's popping up is like rapid testing on site,
Ah,
which could be something. I don't know how it would work with like obviously a restaurant, but for certain shows getting a rapid test or a temperature check, stuff like that. Like I feel like if they just enforced masks and temperature checks and did limited capacity, I don't see. Like, I don't. I'm so curious why that hasn't been allowed. As long as you require businesses to do that.
yeah, I love the fact that maybe like if the wait times are such, and they probably will be because the capacity will be low, it would be so cool if you could like give the hostess your name, take the test, and then 40 minutes later, by the time you get a fucking seat, you're able to find out whether or not you're negative or positive.
Yeah, I mean it would be awesome. I think I think we're heading there. We'll see. I mean,
Wow.
and like there was actually a place I was at recently, and I was surprised because it's a really old school burger spot, but they just to use the bathroom to go indoors, they had to check your temperature, and then you get on a waiting list for the bathroom.
Wow, and even
Yeah,
Starbucks says theirs totally shut down.
yeah, that makes sense, right? Though, because like that's like one of the only reasons people go to Starbucks.
Yeah, and I think I was totally surprised to finally get a temperature check at the dentist, which is where you should have it. But the guy just came out of nowhere and just fucking put a thing against my head, and I was like, dude, I'm a fat guy. It's hot outside. I'm probably running a temperature at all times. But I think in that case, what they do is they let you cool down for 10 minutes and then they take the temperature check. But I think as far as one thing I want to know, penthouse comedy, to the extent comedy will of course continue in New York City and will probably continue on rooftops and then I don't know, beer gardens that are a little bit heated or something like that. But Penthouse Comedy will be at the front of it. You and former guest Shafi, I was saying, are booking some big names. But on your Instagram feed, I also saw you did a rooftop mic, I think, with people like Claire Alexander and May Planner and some former guests who are really great comics too. And so one thing I wanted to ask is, when you go see open micers back in the day, like when you started, what was their how did they compare to the great names that you're booking now? Because you're booking the Joe Lists of the world and things like that. And I want to know, like, even if they're coming and doing kind of new stuff here and there, are you always just fairly confident that they'll pull it out? Whereas, back in the day, open micers, you weren't before. And I think you're the person I'm asking this to just because you and Shafi have so many big names on your shows.
Yeah, well, what's funny is like I'm hitting open mics so hard still, so it's like I definitely have that same experience even now. Like, uh, I think it's just like a you know it's hard to compare. They're just so much better. But they've been doing it like so much longer, and it's like it's also like I'm realizing with comedy, the more I do it, it's like the hardest workers are always gonna like thrive. The person that you always see at the mics, and like there's some people that are at open mics that are amazing and really good, but uh, people like List or Normand or all those types of people. It's like not only is their writing great, but they're also just like hitting. All they do is they like eat, sleep, and breathe comedy. So it's like and they've been doing it for so long. Like they're as good as it gets. So it's kind of cool because it's like what we're striving for as open mic comedians, but it's not. Yeah, there's just like no comparison. They're
It's
just so
not
much
the same.
better.
It's probably like seeing Michael Jordan during a shoot around versus
So, yeah,
some G leaguer or something like that.
and also even like especially because these outdoor shows, they could get a little uh like sometimes it's hard to hear laughter. Like the show we had last night, you like someone would be doing well, but it's hard to tell you're doing well
Ah.
because of the way the sound's traveling. Also, there was like a train going by and like all these other things you got to deal with. And the people that are like the pros are just so much better at handling that.
So they kind of incorporate it into their act. They'll point it out too.
Right, like they're super present. Something happens, and now that's a riff. and that's like what makes everyone laugh. And it's like I think they just handle stuff like that so much better.
Yes, and somebody like Mark Norman in the park, he's been doing those videos of him in the parks and things like that, and it's so fun to watch him, just kind of riff. And sometimes, he acknowledges that the riff, with his riff, he's acknowledging that it's not going well, or that, in this sunny post-pandemic time, people don't want to go too dark with their comedy or something, and so he's able to riff on it. And you're able to see the pain that might freak out an open micer. They might freeze up and not be able to tell a joke after that.
For sure. And also, it's funny. I also think there's just like a huge difference in the standard. Like they might think like a pro might say it's not going well, and to me I consider that going amazing. So like because I saw, I forget who it was, but I saw someone in a like at a park show, and it was just hard to hear.
Yeah.
But like up front, I was like in stitches. But then I guess they thought that they weren't doing well because they kept like riffing on jokes bombing. But to me, I'm like, that joke didn't bomb. I thought that like
That's
very.
so funny. 10 people laughing instead of the normal 100, and they're thinking, oh, well, you guys don't really like that one. It's like, no, that's fucking killing in the park.
Yeah, it's just, and it's also hard because you're enclosed in a comedy club, and that's what everyone's used to, and like the sound of laughter, it's like thunderous, when you're indoors, but when you're outdoors, it's just like the sound is not nearly as good, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah, but it's nice that maybe you didn't get used to that yet. They
Yeah,
got totally used to it. And then there's people like Nikki Glazer on Rogan recently, and she's like, dude, it's just like now you go to these places with lower capacity. It's like those clubs back in the day who didn't know how to seat people. And so it's just like all the clubs suck now because of the social distancing. But if you didn't get used to those laughs and people piled on top of each other, and the room being dark and great acoustics and people, just drinking their ass off, I mean, then you don't know what you missed. And so, yeah, what are the stepping stones now? I mean, like, oh, I got Penthouse Comedy Show. Meaning like a comic coming up will be like, dude, I get to play on the tiny covered rooftop. That's pretty sweet. That's a credit.
right,
Like,
right.
what are the credits now? Like, kind of what can people strive for? And is anybody tempted to leave the city and go to places that are not as locked down, even if on like a touring basis?
Yeah, I was
Especially if
talking.
they don't have jobs, and especially if they were getting unemployment to the tune of $1,000 a week.
Yeah, I was talking to some comics about this yesterday, and I think if if it does get shut down again, it's gonna be interesting. It might just go back to like what we were doing before with like Zoom, and I really hope it doesn't happen. But
Yeah.
that's what it might go back to. But also, I think there's definitely going to be people that just, especially if you're like a full time comedian, I feel like it's almost in your best interest to go somewhere where it's warm and comedy clubs are open or
Uh,
outdoor shows are being performed because it's like I feel like what the virus showed us is like very like state to state, like so
yeah.
New York is shut down, but like now there's a thriving comedy scene in like Texas or California. I don't see. I mean, some obviously, it's hard to like move and you have commitments to leases and it's whatever. But like, if you have the ability to, I don't see why you wouldn't. But that's just like a personal opinion. I don't know how many people will actually do that.
Yeah, especially if they have space. Not only the warm weather, but fucking take a big old, any fucking cul-de-sac neighborhood has about 10 parks in it. Of course, like, that sort of existence frowns upon the arts scene, though. You,
Right.
you might get down there and the weather's great and you have a lot of space, but you have all these fucking suburban moms being like, I don't want these dick and fart jokes in my neighborhood.
Yeah, you know what though? Also, those areas those areas like their restaurants or their bars or their comedy clubs are so much bigger because commercial real estate's so much cheaper. So you
Yeah.
could social distance way better outside of the city. Even upstate, you probably could. So like it's especially with like all the mechanisms we have in place now with like PPE, temperature checks, social distancing. I feel like comedy clubs will be open come winter. It just might not be in New York City,
Yeah.
because it's so hard here because we're so like everything's so tight.
And that's just like, I'm wondering why there isn't more like comedy houses. Like you said, like if you can get, I've had like 160 guests on. If we all go down to Florida, I imagine we can almost fucking start a scene. But I guess that's effectively what you guys did pre-pandemic in Brooklyn. You're like, we don't all have to live in the same comedy house because we all live within 3 blocks of each other,
Right.
and we can all, just get good thriving mics going and good bar shows going. Um, But yeah, like, and I guess my question is, like, you might be the guy to do it because you're penthouse comedy, your commercial real estate and things like that. But is there a way to kind of organize the scene better, such that the mics are better, the bar shows are better, there's not as much competition, there's more collaboration. And I just kind of trailed off my question, but that, I think that was the question. Like, yeah, is there a way to do it? Is there a way to be like, okay, I'm Shafi Hossein, I'm Jake Velazquez, I've had 100 comics on. I want to get them all together and find a way for us to create a scene going forward, whether or not it's in New York City or if it's online.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we'll probably just continue to like find places to do shows. And like we talked about, if the weather gets too cold and New York shuts down, we think like upstate New York or Connecticut would be open, and then we could use like a track record here to go out there. But
Yeah.
in terms of like starting a scene, I think it would have to be like someone much bigger than us. Like what's his name? Like Rogan's moving to Texas. I'm
All
sure that's
right.
going to start something.
Oh yeah, at the very least, the fucking incestuous LA scene will become the incestuous Austin scene.
Right.
But also, I think it's maybe you guys, maybe you and Shafi aren't the people to do it because you guys are doing so well. Like it's, you guys are putting on shows a couple times a month or whatever, and you guys are playing with, or you're playing on stage with some of the bigger names in New York City comedy. Is that kind of, you know, would you have had the same opinion on that 5 years ago when you weren't so juiced in? I mean, now, like, that's almost, you know, that's part of the success. It's like, once you get to a certain point and you paid your dues, so you don't need to give back, but like, you really have no incentive to change things because you're fucking doing well, right?
Yeah, well, actually, I think part of that is being opportunistic in this like climate, because we, I don't know if we would have gotten the same names if there were more opportunities. Like if these comics could do sets at the Cellar, I don't know if they
Yeah.
would be doing sets on our roof. Maybe they, I don't know. But like it seems like it's much easier because we're also, through like donations or ticket sales able to pay comics. We're giving
Yeah.
them like the same paid spots that they were getting pre-pandemic, just not in comedy clubs, just on rooftops. And so like that's why we're able to get everybody. But and also now we've built like a decent enough track record. I mean, it's been pretty. We're still pretty early on, so I don't want to like get ahead of myself. But we've built a decent enough track record that like people, I guess, trust us that the show is not going to be an absolute airball, and that they'll have a good time and a good crowd, and and get paid.
So
So
it's only now when you finally, so you're gonna feast while there's food to eat, right?
right, exactly, and that's
Because
it,
you've been hungry for far too long, and it might go that way again if all these clubs open up and this top tier talent goes to the cellar or something.
yeah, exactly. But hopefully now doing this for the few months, not only building good connections, but uh, like proving that we'll put on a good show, and then also just like maybe people will remember us, maybe they'll continue to do our shows when they're available, and so just like kind of like I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because
Yeah,
it's hard to see like what's going to happen. But as long as we do good work now, I think it'll pay off in the future. And so like
yeah.
that's the way I'm looking at it.
And so, and I see in your Twitter bio that you are a Puerto Rican Jew proudly. And so,
Yes.
yeah, I would think that as a Puerto Rican Jew, like at what point did you start getting these opportunities, like pre-pandemic? When did you meet Shafi Hossein, and when did you start kind of playing with some of the bigger names on the bill? What was your comedy journey as a Puerto Rican Jew when you got to New York City, or maybe you lived here all your life?
Yeah, I grew up here. I think actually Puerto Rican Jews is like a indigenous New York species.
Yes.
It's hard to find this anywhere else. There's probably like 30, and they're all in like the Bronx.
Yes, you have quite
Yeah,
the scene.
yeah, no, for sure. So I don't know how much of a fan base I'll be able to develop with that, but we'll see. But no, I met Shafi like probably about a year ago, but we're just like casually at open mics, and then we didn't really start this until pretty recent. Like we kind of like just got started on it. Like our first show was like maybe about a month ago,
Wow.
but it's been in the works for let's say 2 months because I had like a mic on my roof because I just wanted to like because there was no mics at the time. Like there was just Zoom stuff, and I had the rooftop, and I figured I'll buy a microphone, I'll buy an amp, and I'll do a mic at my house. And then Shafi came to one, and then it was actually Shafi's idea. He's like, "This would be a great place for a show." And then I stopped doing the mic because I didn't want to get any complaints from my build. And then we just started doing the show there. And then once we got the first show, we went to these venues in Brooklyn. One that Shafi knew, and then one that I knew from work. And then we were supposed to have another one in the Bronx, but unfortunately, Cuomo is trying to crack down on like liquor license.
Yeah.
Like the SLA is cracking down on like any business with a liquor license can't have like these ticketed events. So that one in the Bronx is actually on hold. But
Okay.
now we got these, these three spots, and we'll keep. I mean, I think it's enough. Honestly, I don't know how many more shows we could really handle, but uh, we'll just keep doing it until we see what happens. And then if we have to like pivot to like other areas, then we'll end up doing that.
And so kind of before you met Shafi though, like were you doing open mics and things like that, or how long have you been doing it in New York City? And was it difficult to find the Shafi Hosseins of the comedy scene that were, like-minded with the Puerto Rican Jew?
Uh, well, so I actually like tried comedy like so I'm like 29 now. I tried twice in my early 20s for like 6 months at a time,
Okay.
and then like in out, and I was working a lot, so it was just hard to do.
Yeah.
And just recently, as I worked long enough, I didn't have as much of a workload, and I was able to kind of like jump into comedy.
Yeah.
So now for like a year and a half, it's like I do like 2, 3 mics a day every day, and then just when you do that, when you're like grinding, you just meet a lot of people. So then that's kind of how I met Shafi, and I think we're like-minded in that we're just both really hard workers. So I
Yeah.
love working with him because I think I'd get on anybody else's nerves because I'm like always texting and like thinking of something, and he's the
uh,
same, but he's the same way. So it's like
he
it's
appreciates the hustle.
yeah. So I actually like working with him a lot.
Yeah, he's very nuanced. I try to get him to kind of tear apart American stereotypes, and he's the first to tell you that, yeah, that might be the stereotype, but once you get here, there's 1,000 different, everybody's kind of individual, and you don't paint with too broad of a brush, and I love that. And I also love, like, once you hustle your ass off, you tend to run into a lot of people over and over again. I had Adam Mueller in the studio, and he knew the person before him and the person after him. Like, we were stacking up, one episode right after the other, and everybody knew Adam Mueller, and they're like, "Oh, great set last night," or whatever. And I'm like, "Wow, that's a hustler right there."
Oh yeah, I mean he's like in two places at once. That guy, crazy. I see him. Before the pandemic, I felt like every mic I'd go to, he was there. It's like how this guy is at every place. Yeah, no,
And
he's
I
definitely.
think that didn't even hit a finance career or something like that, I thought.
Yeah,
And
I
so
believe.
yeah, some of these people with their white collar jobs, whatever, like John Listman seems to be something similar with his Monte mornings. Like his day job is a lawyer, and my day job is a lawyer. And so it's you're a commercial real estate dude. So it's just like some of this hustle can really do well in comedy. You just have, the tough part is also being funny though. I can't imagine going to three mics a night and being in a good enough mood to riff on the mic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's so much fun. I just love it. So it's like I'm down to be around it at all times. But I think no, I think careers like that, at least for me, like with real estate, especially because it's like commission based and you have to be a self starter.
Yeah.
Uh, it built like the best habits. So my habits are like I keep track of like how many mics I'm doing a week, and I treat it as if it's like a game. And that's
Yeah.
like something I learned from real estate. So I feel like there's just like good habits that I built, and I think a lot of other those type of careers build good habits for people to be.
And
Uh,
in gamifying it, what is the extent of your records? It's not only how many you went to, but is it to see, did you go to more this week than you did last week, or are you also like, oh, this mic sucked because there's only three people there? I mean, how much stuff do you write down? Because I think Adam Mueller got pretty specific. He even like wrote down the numbers corresponding with the belly laughs, etc.
oh wow, that's no, I don't do anything. I keep it pretty simple. Uh, it's because it's like you can only control so much, so I just focus on like the things I have control over. So
Right.
it's like how many mics am I hitting a week, and then trying to be consistent, and then like it's like, oh, this is how much I do on an average week. So then I know, okay, if I hit like, let's say the average week is like 15, and I hit 10, it's like, okay, that was a shitty week. Like next week I'll try to hit more than 15, and just kind of like view it from that lens. But it's hard
Okay.
to control like the turnout and how the audience is. and so like I try to pay as little attention to that, just because it'll drive me crazy when it doesn't
Yeah,
go my way. So like
yeah,
I only focus on the things I can control and stuff.
yeah. Like a true salesman too. It's like
Yeah,
you can only like take down. Oh, I made 100 calls this week or something. You can't control, how many actually buy this week.
right, exactly. So it's like that's something I took from that, and also same thing with um, like how much time I put into writing, how much time I put into like how many shows I'm doing. Like that's all stuff I have a little more control over. So I'll try to like help with that, like or track and make sure I do that.
And that's how you ended up on the Penthouse, man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what got me here.
Well, yeah, well, track all the Penthouse Comedy Show is going to be, a show that has all the big names, and we'll see what happens when, New York City returns. I think their reputation for quality will, continue unabated, and hopefully we'll see the Claire Alexanders and May Planners up there. But in the meantime, stay tuned. Jake D. Velazquez at Twitter, and then Jake_Velazquez at Instagram, and it's spelled like the painter.
Yes.
Dude,
Perfect.
Jake Velazquez, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Brian. I appreciate you having me on.